Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a crazy story to tell you about how I pissed off all of Malaysia. I'm going to be sharing a lot of screenshots, a lot of websites, articles, links, and things like that on the screen, interspersed with a lot of Modern Warfare Remastered gameplay where I used ill-advised suppressed weapons and tried to get some fun kills. A few days ago, things did not go the way I had them planned. I went to the Asian grocery store to pick up a surprise for my brother. I picked up a couple of random Asian sodas because my brother loves soda, so I wanted to get him like 4 or 5 random things to try. And I picked up this drink called Grass Jelly Drink. We were both kind of skeptical. We tried it together. We both took one drink, spit it out, and agreed that it was pretty terrible. So I shared it on Twitter saying, never drink this. It is the worst drink on the planet. And I didn't think much of it because I share food stuff and Asian reviews and culture and things like that on Twitter all the time. Diesel Frost says, "You lost me at grass jelly. Of all the delicious things you can turn into jelly, they chose grass." I retweeted him. Most of my English followers more or less agreed that they don't know why I would want to drink something like that anyway. But unbeknownst to me, this went very viral in Malaysia and Singapore and around Southeast Asia. There were people quote tweeting saying, "Don't you dare talk about my Sin Sao like that ever again. Respect Sin Sao." Sin Sao being the local name of the drink, and I'm almost certainly not pronouncing that correctly. Here's one. I don't even like Sin Sao that much, but if I have to see one more white person disrespect our food and drinks, ... And this kind of blew up my timeline. I didn't see these, so I don't know what happened, but my timeline just filled with angry Malaysian people, which I took a screenshot of and shared, which then itself went viral in Malaysia because apparently there's some swear words in there and some bad things that were really uncalled for in the situation. I had some nice people share it and, you know, kind of talk about it, and there's people saying that I'm using it wrong and that I should be putting it on desserts or mixing it with other drinks. But in general, it got really toxic really fast, and my timeline blew up and went insane. I've got people saying it's not made from grass, dude. You can use Twitter to mock, use Google to search. It's delicious and good for you, unlike alcohol, which is a white person and a Western person stereotype. Now, for those of you that don't know, Malaysia is one of the largest Muslim countries on the planet. I think that there might be number 2 or 3 compared to Indonesia, very predominantly Muslim. So the stereotype that white people and Westerners like myself drink alcohol is very common, and we'll come back to that later. There were lots of kind of weird random threats coming in. This person, which I had to use Google Translate for, was basically saying this was their favorite drink for study time, and they sent me little knives. Some of these don't translate very well. A lot of these people wrote English. It says, "White people complain about every food on earth, but forget that their seasoning are only salt and pepper." It says, "We're tired of your pasty asses. Stay in your unseasoned lane, bruh." Now this person ended up deleting their Twitter account because I replied to them, and then I don't know what happened. My fans got involved and things got really kind of ridiculous. People talking about bland taste buds. Then we have another one about alcohol, another one, a parody of mine, "Never drink this, it's the worst drink on the planet," which of course I replied to. I don't actually drink alcohol. I really don't. I don't drink alcohol. Had parents that were alcoholics that did really bad things that really cocked up my childhood, so I just don't drink alcohol. Not a moral Nazi about it. By all means, if you drink, that's fine, but it's just not for me. People telling me to keep my opinion to myself, that I need to have some respect for their culture. Ali Mew stepped in. She's ethnically Chinese, but born and raised in New York, currently living in England with her husband, to kind of defend me. She's had some of these before, and of course the Malaysian stepped in to tell her she's not a real Asian. Had some nice people try to explain why it's such a big part of their culture, and Aaron Lee, who is verified and has 1 million followers on Twitter, put a little love on this and let me know it was going viral. It showed up on a Singaporean website. I think this one's Mothership. There's the screenshot you saw right there. This one's Asia One. It's a random vlog. This one showed up on Malaysia Digest. I never expected to be on Malaysian Digest. I have no idea why this happened, but generally speaking, a lot of the stuff I didn't show you was insults that didn't translate very well, but were incredibly harsh and mean. I have some Malaysian in-laws that I got them to look at, and I got hundreds, thousands of these. It's still going around. If I open up my Twitter timeline today, it is nothing but filled with hate on me and white people and Sin Sao and, you know, some other people coming in to apologize for their countrymen. And I had to use Google Translate on a lot of these to try and get an idea of what was going on. And Google Translate works on Malaysian or Twitter, Malay, English, sort of hybrid, whatever, is pretty poorly. So it was kind of funny to me to read instead of being insulting. But it was sad to see a lot of racist stuff get thrown my way when my wife is Chinese and the best man at my wedding was black, which you wouldn't think much of, but this was deep in the South, and had some family members that weren't super impressed by that, or the fact that I was marrying a Chinese girl, or that my in-laws are Malaysian, or that I actually traveled to Singapore and Japan. I was supposed to go to Malaysia, but that didn't pan out during the time. I eat fish heads, I eat squirrel fish, I eat Malaysian food, I eat Singaporean food, I eat all kind of stuff. And I kind of sound like the guy who's counting the number of black friends he has when he gets accused of being racist. So you're going to say, okay, Drifter, that's great. Congrats, you're not racist. Well, what's the point? The point is, I've been waiting to make a video like this for a long time on the topic of racism versus prejudice and the ever-changing definition of the words. However, without a reason to do so, with no good segue into it, it just seemed like I was shitlording, and I just wanted to bring up the topic for no reason and stir up trouble, and it would probably make me look very bigoted, but with a very personal, direct, and obviously international newsworthy experience like this, I decided to just go ahead and jump right into it. So congratulations, today we're doing racism versus prejudice, mostly semantics and linguistic definitions, but I think that those are very important things. I personally do not like the alt-left pushing to change the definition of the word racism. Racism used to mean discriminating against others based on race. Short versions, you can find different definitions online, but most dictionaries would have something similar to that. But currently, there's a large group of people already believing and already actively campaigning to change the word of racism, to redefine it to discrimination based on race from a position of power or privilege, and that last little bit right there is an important distinction, because I think that this creates a volatile new insult and shields others from criticism. And I do believe that words and our definitions and how we use them are important. They do have impact, they have meaning, and they can inspire change. For example, and we're going to loop back around to the racism in a second, I actually support the push to change the current definitions of the words sex and gender. Up until very recently, they were synonyms, which means they're words that have the same meaning, they're interchangeable, and that's a synonym into itself. We're getting very meta here. But with the growth of alternative lifestyles, of orientations, and trans culture, and openness, and all that sort of thing, the words that we use to describe people's gender, sex, orientation are antiquated. They're not as the situations are not as simple as they used to be. So the general push these days is to change the word sex to mean genitalia, what biological genitalia you have, penis, vagina, whatever, and gender to mean whatever social role you take, which is to some degree orientation, which to some degree will vary from culture to culture and context to context. For everyday use, I think this is a lot easier. For gender, it's a much more descriptive thing. For sex, it's much more of a binary, saving a few people that have chromosomal disorders. Don't get me started on the Tumblr arenas and the 47 genders of dumb and identifying as attack helicopter and other kin and all that kind of crazy stuff. That's a fringe group, and they're actually making things worse for the main group, but changing these definitions has been helpful to our language. Now, looping back around to the racism topic, I think the part that bothers me about this is that when we change the definition of the word, it basically makes it to where only white people can be racist. Generally speaking, it is assumed by people that use this definition that only white people have positions of power in the US and often globally because of colonialization, which showed up in my Twitter timeline a crap load about white people colonializing things. So only white people can be racist because they are the only people that hold positions of power, and only white people can hold racist sentiments. Other races are capable only of prejudice, which is a much lesser sin, and it allows them to sort of semantically shield themselves from any criticism in any discussion, any insult, or any behavior, and therefore enables really inappropriate lashing out toward white people who supposedly deserve it. And I ran into a good bit of that when I engaged a few of the more hostile people here in this Twitter timeline. I was told very similar things, that they weren't being racist, that I was being racist because my opinions on their culture and colonization and lots of more complicated things. And I think this definition only creates more issues, which is exactly the point, that it allows them to at least mentally shield themselves from criticism, and if it spreads, it could be very, very divisive. Speaking of language, currently, racism is just a more specific type of prejudice. You can be prejudiced against somebody based on their race, or their class or caste, income, their religion, their nationality, their age, their gender, their level of disability, what sports team they like. There are thousands of reasons that one person can be prejudiced against another, and almost every person on this planet harbors some degree of prejudice for something, even if they're not necessarily aware of it. And another thing that goofs me up about this changing definition of the word racism is that you don't have to travel far before you learn that whatever the majority group in a region is, they almost always have the power. Few exceptions aside, the groups that have the power aren't necessarily always white people. You don't have to travel far in Korea, Japan, or China before you run into restaurants, businesses, and services that are specifically for locals only. For instance, I'm going to pick in Japan here, some clubs don't let white people in. Some hotels are for Japanese only. Some restaurants are Japanese only. It's the same thing in Korea, a little bit less so in China, but these countries greatly prefer locals over foreigners, even to the extent of having it written into the law depending on the treatment and many different things. And Malaysia is no exception to this. They are not kind to their Chinese ethnic minority. When I talk about my Malaysian in-laws, they're ethnically Malaysian Chinese, and they are an oppressed people. I know there's going to be a lot of Malaysian people watching this video, so I'm not going to go into it too far and poke the bear, but I've heard some really horrific things about the way that they're treated, and it's kind of spooky. So if we're going to redefine racism to include the power privilege aspect of it, we have to do so conscientiously with consideration to local powers and regional differences as well. And there's no clear-cut answer on any of these things, on if I was being racist by insulting a drink, if people were being racist by insulting me back about being white, though I'm pretty sure they were, but that's not the point, because there's no easy solution to discrimination, to bigotry, to prejudice. The world isn't there's not gonna be one idea that's just gonna pop up in the sky that everybody's gonna agree on, and tomorrow we're gonna wake up and live happily under a big rainbow. That's just not gonna happen. But we can stop and think about our actions, and think about our words, and think about what we mean to say, and the consequences of those things. For instance, what I learned from this, directly from Malaysians, I should add, is that some cultures really believe that food should be respected. In their culture and many others, food is very important. Now, in America, food is sustenance. You eat it so that you can do your other things, and that ties into our divine providence and our Christian upbringing, and that we live to serve and live to work. But their food is of a much higher level of importance in other countries as well, and therefore it inherently deserves some degree of respect on its own. So me kind of taking a crap on one of their favorite foods was viewed as a direct insult to the culture. It's something I had no idea about even existed, and I learned a very harsh lesson. So all I learned was that I need to keep this in mind for future discussions moving forward about other cultures and other foods and things like that. Now, I hope that you learned something from this video about racism, reverse racism, discrimination, prejudice, language, semantics, words, actions, meanings, all these other kind of important things. I didn't give you hard, concrete solutions today because that's not how the world works. But what I wanted to do was inspire some of you to think about some of these things and hopefully challenge your own beliefs and learn something new. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.